We are taught that the West was won by cowboys and sheriffs, but the true conquest of America wasn't fought in dusty corrals. It was fought in the granite tunnels of the Sierras and the boardrooms of Wall Street. In 1866, the most dangerous weapon in America wasn't a Colt revolver. It was a stick of nitroglycerin. This is the story of the spies, the saboteurs, and the ghosts who built the spine of a nation. Welcome to Deep American Stories. Chapter 1. The Ghost of Donner Pass. October 14th, 1866. The Sierra Nevada Mountains. The cold in the Sierras didn't just sit on the skin, it burrowed. It found the marrow of a man's bones and stayed there, whispering that he would never be warm again. Elias Thorne adjusted the collar of his Union-issue greatcoat, though the wool had worn thin 3 years ago outside of Petersburg. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was a geological consultant for the Central Pacific Railroad. At least that's what the ledger in Sacramento said. In reality, Elias was a cleaner. When the railroad had a problem that couldn't be solved with a shovel or a bribe, they sent Elias. He stood at the edge of the precipice, looking down into the abyssal drop of the American River Canyon. The wind howled, carrying the scent of pine resin and the acrid metallic tang of blasting powder. "You're standing too close, Mr. Thorne," a voice said behind him. Elias didn't turn. He knew the voice. It belonged to Liam O'Connor, a foreman who swung a hammer like a vengeful god and drank whiskey like it was mother's milk. "If I fall, Liam, it saves you the trouble of pushing me," Elias said, finally turning. O'Connor was a mountain of a man, his face obscured by a thicket of red beard, his eyes narrowed against the biting wind. He held a lantern that swayed, casting long, dancing shadows against the snow-dusted rock. "The Chinamen are refusing to go into the tunnel," O'Connor rumbled. "They say the rock sings." Elias sighed, the breath pluming white in front of him. "The rock sings?" "That's what the translator said. Bad spirits, demons in the granite. They downed tools an hour ago. Crocker's furious. He says if they aren't drilling by midnight, he's docking everyone's pay, including mine." Elias lit a cigarette, cupping his hands against the gale. "It's not demons, Liam. It's stress fracture. When the granite is under that much pressure, it groans before it snaps. They're right to be scared." "I don't pay 'em to be right," O'Connor spat. "I pay 'em to drill. You're the fixer. Go fix it." Elias flicked the match into the abyss. He walked past O'Connor toward the mouth of Tunnel Number 6. This was the Summit Tunnel, the nightmare of the Central Pacific. They were trying to bore through 1,600 feet of solid granite at an elevation of 7,000 feet. It was madness. It was the greatest engineering feat in history, and people were dying every day to make it happen. As Elias approached the tunnel mouth, the chaotic noise of the work camp faded. The tunnel entrance looked like a throat opening into the earth. Inside, the air was thick with rock dust and the smell of unwashed bodies. A group of Chinese laborers stood near the face of the rock, their lanterns creating a pool of yellow light. They were small men, wiry and incredibly strong, wearing blue cotton tunics that offered no protection against the freezing dampness of the tunnel. Elias spotted their leader, a man named Chen. Chen was different from the others. He spoke perfect English, having learned it in the gold fields a decade prior. He stood with his arms crossed, staring at the rock face. "Chen," Elias said, his voice echoing off the damp walls, "O'Connor tells me we have a concert tonight." Chen turned. His face was impassive, carved from wood. "Mr. Thorne, the mountain is warning us." "It's settling, Chen. We blasted 6 hours ago. The rock is just settling." "No," Chen said softly. He walked to the wall and placed a palm against the cold stone. "Put your hand here." Elias hesitated, then stepped forward. He removed his glove and pressed his hand against the jagged granite. He felt it immediately. Not a vibration, a hum, a rhythmic, low-frequency thrumming that seemed to come from deep within the mountain's core. It wasn't natural. Granite didn't hum. "Steam?" Elias whispered. "There are no steam vents here," Chen said. "We are in the heart of the needle." Elias pressed his ear to the stone. He closed his eyes, filtering out the wind outside and the shifting of boots behind him. He listened. Thump, thump, thump. It was faint, but it was there. It sounded like a heartbeat, or a hammer striking metal, muffled by hundreds of feet of rock. Elias pulled back, his eyes wide. Who is working the other side? "No one," Chen said. "The Union Pacific is 2,000 miles in Nebraska. We are alone here." Elias's mind raced. He was a man of logic, a man of maps and ballistics, but this made no sense, unless— "Clear the tunnel," Elias ordered. "We have not drilled the holes for the morning blast," Chen protested, though his eyes showed relief. "I said clear the tunnel, now," Elias roared, his voice cracking with a sudden, intuitive panic he hadn't felt since the trenches of Cold Harbor. Chen shouted a command in Cantonese. The men didn't hesitate. They grabbed their picks and lanterns and scrambled toward the exit. Elias stayed behind for a moment, staring at the blank face of the granite. The humming was getting louder. He could feel it in the soles of his boots now. He turned and ran. He made it 20 yards before the world disintegrated. It wasn't an explosion from behind the rock. It was the floor, the solid granite floor of tunnel number 6, which had been stable for 3 months, suddenly buckled upward. A geyser of steam and shattered rock erupted from the ground, knocking Elias off his feet. He hit the wall hard, tasting blood. The air instantly filled with blinding, choking dust. Elias crawled, dragging himself over debris, his ears ringing. He saw the dim light of the tunnel entrance ahead. He scrambled towards it, coughing, his lungs burning. He tumbled out into the snow, gasping for air. O'Connor was there, staring into the tunnel with his mouth open. "Mother of God," O'Connor whispered. "The boiler?" "There's no boiler in there," Elias shouted, staggering to his feet. He wiped blood from his lip. "That wasn't an accident, Liam. That was a charge. Someone planted a charge under the tunnel floor." O'Connor looked at him like he was insane. "Under? How in the hell could someone get under the tunnel floor? It's solid mountain." Elias looked back at the smoking maw of the tunnel. The humming had stopped. "I don't know," Elias said, his mind already turning over the impossibility of it. "But someone just tried to collapse the summit tunnel, and they didn't care if we were inside." October 20th, 1866, Sacramento, California. The Big Four headquarters was a testament to new money, mahogany paneling, crystal decanters, and the thick scent of expensive cigars. Leland Stanford, the president of the Central Pacific and former governor of California, sat behind a desk that looked large enough to sail a ship. Beside him stood Collis Huntington, the ruthless financial wizard of the operation. Elias stood before them, holding his hat. He looked out of place in his rough field clothes, but he refused to dress up for these men. He knew where the bodies were buried because he had dug the holes. "Sabotage," Huntington said, rolling the word around his mouth like a marble. "That is a heavy word, Mr. Thorne. It implies we have enemies." "You're building a railroad that will change the economy of the world," Elias said dryly. "You have enemies, Mr. Huntington. The Union Pacific, the stagecoach lines, the shipping magnates who go around the Horn. Take your pick." "But underneath the floor?" Stanford asked, leaning forward. "How?" "I went back in after the dust settled," Elias said. "We found a fissure. It wasn't natural. Someone had been drilling up from a lower elevation, a ventilation shaft perhaps, and packed it with black powder. It was timed. Timed for the shift change? Stanford asked. No, Elias said. Timed for when the inspector was supposed to be there. If I hadn't been delayed by O'Connor, I would have been standing exactly where the floor blew out. The room went silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock seemed deafening. Huntington walked to the window, looking out at the bustling streets of Sacramento. This confirms it, then. The leak is real. Elias stiffened. What leak? Huntington turned. We've been losing survey maps, not just any maps, the confidential routes through the Nevada desert, the ones that secure our federal land grants. If the Union Pacific gets those maps, they can anticipate our line, block our grading, and bankrupt us before we hit
Utah. I thought that was just incompetence, Elias said. Surveyors get drunk, lose papers. 3 surveyors in a month? Huntington countered. 2 were found dead. Robbery, the sheriff said, but their wallets were full. Only the maps were gone. Stanford stood up. Mr. Thorne, we hired you because you were the best scout in the Army of the Potomac. You found Confederate artillery positions that didn't exist on paper. We need you to find something for us now. I'm a geologist now, Governor. I look at rocks. We have plenty of men who can look at rocks, Huntington snapped. We need a hunter. He slid a folder across the mahogany desk. Elias opened it. Inside was a photograph, a tintype. It showed a woman standing on the platform of a train station. She was striking, dressed in mourning black, with a veil pulled back to reveal sharp, intelligent eyes. Her name is Sarah Jenkins, Huntington said. She claims to be the widow of a Union Pacific surveyor. She's been seen in Sacramento, Reno, and near the summit camps. Every time she appears, we lose a map or a tunnel blows up. You want me to arrest her? Elias asked. We have no proof, Stanford said. We want you to get close to her. She's boarding the overland stage to Virginia City tomorrow. We believe she's meeting her handler there to sell the latest stolen surveys. Elias looked at the photo. Sarah Jenkins. She looked harmless, but Elias knew that the harmless ones were usually the ones holding the knife. I'm not a spy, gentlemen, Elias said, closing the folder. No, Stanford said, a cold smile touching his lips. You're a man who wants his land grant in Oregon. You want that apple orchard you won't shut up about. You do this, find the leak, stop the sabotage, and we'll give you the deed to 500 acres in the Willamette Valley, free and clear. Elias looked at the folder, then at Huntington. 500 acres. Silence. Peace. No more dynamite. No more blood. The overland stage leaves at dawn? Elias asked. 6 a.m., Stanford said. Elias put his hat back on. I'll be on it. October 21st, 1866. The overland stage. The coach rocked violently as it navigated the rutted road toward the Nevada border. Dust coated the interior, settling in the creases of Elias's clothes. He sat opposite Sarah Jenkins. She was reading a book, Great Expectations. She hadn't looked up since they left Sacramento. She was smaller than she looked in the photo, her hands gloved in black lace. She didn't look like a saboteur. She looked like a school teacher. There were 2 other passengers, a nervous-looking banker clutching a briefcase and a sleeping cowboy who smelled of stale beer. Elias decided to make his move. He pulled a silver flask from his coat. The road's rough today, he said, offering the flask toward her. Brandy helps settle the stomach, ma'am. Sarah lowered her book. Her eyes were green, piercingly so. She looked at the flask, then at Elias's face. She didn't smile. I prefer to keep my wits about me, sir, she said. Her voice was refined, East Coast, Boston maybe. Especially on this road. Highwaymen are quite common, I hear. Only if you have something worth stealing, Elias said, capping the flask. I'm just a geologist, nothing but rocks in my bag.
A geologist, she raised an eyebrow. For the railroad? For the railroad, Elias lied. Boring work, just checking soil density. I find nothing boring about the railroad, Sarah said, closing her book. It is the vein that will carry the blood of this country, or the poison. Poison, Elias paused. Progress has a cost, Mr. Thorne, Elias Thorne. Mr. Thorne, the railroad destroys everything it touches to build something new. It is a violent act, don't you think? Creation is always violent, Mrs. Jenkins. She froze. The coach hit a bump, rattling their teeth, but her gaze didn't waver. I didn't tell you my name, she whispered. Elias cursed himself internally. He had slipped. He was rusty. The manifest, he recovered quickly. I saw the driver's list before we boarded. She studied him for a long moment. She wasn't buying it. Her hand moved subtly toward her reticule, a small handbag resting on her lap. Elias knew the weight of a Derringer pistol. He judged the distance. If she drew, he could block her arm before she leveled it. The tension in the carriage was palpable, thicker than the dust. Suddenly, the coach lurched sideways. The horses screamed. The driver shouted from above, followed by the deafening crack of a rifle shot. The banker screamed as the coach slammed into a ditch, tilting at a 45-degree angle. Elias was thrown against the door. Sarah was thrown into him. For a split second, as they tangled together, Elias felt it. Not a pistol in her coat. Harder, rectangular, a set of surveyor plates. The coach came to a grinding halt. Outside, heavy boots hit the dirt. "Everyone out," a rough voice shouted. "Hands where we can see 'em." Elias looked at Sarah. She wasn't terrified. She was calculating. "Friends of yours?" Elias whispered. "If they were friends, they wouldn't be shooting," she hissed back. Elias kicked the door open. He stepped out into the blinding Nevada sun, hands raised. 3 men on horseback had the coach surrounded, bandanas over their faces, Winchester rifles leveled. But they weren't looking at the banker. They weren't looking at the cowboy. The leader pointed his rifle directly at Elias. "Mr. Thorne, Mr. Huntington sends his regards. He says you're asking too many questions." Elias's blood ran cold. It wasn't Sarah. It wasn't the Union Pacific. The call was coming from inside the house. Sarah stepped out behind him. The gunman shifted his aim to her. "And the lady. We'll take the plates now, Miss Jenkins, and then we'll bury you both in the same hole." Elias looked at Sarah. She looked at him. In that moment, the enemies became allies by necessity. "On 3, Elias whispered. 2, Sarah replied, her hand slipping back into her bag. 1.